The maid accidentally wore the billionaire's shirt, and he couldn't look away. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The morning light filtered softly through the marble hallways of Cross Manor, the kind of place where silence itself seemed expensive. Mara Jenkins hurried across the corridor clutching a stack of freshly ironed clothes. She was new here 2 weeks into her housekeeping job, and still terrified of making mistakes. The billionaire who owned this place, Ethan Cross, was rumored to be precise to the second, distant, unreadable. That morning, in her rush, she noticed one crisp white shirt hanging over a chair in the laundry room. The tag read, "C. Armani." She didn't think twice. She slipped it on to keep warm while she folded sheets, planning to take it off in a minute. But the minute turned into 10, then 20. The cotton was soft, faintly scented with expensive cologne cedar, musk, something that made her heart beat faster. Just as she turned toward the window, a quiet voice startled her. "That's mine." She froze. Ethan stood at the doorway, hair still damp from his morning run, gray t-shirt clinging to his chest, eyes fixed on her. His gaze moved from her tangled bun down to the oversized white shirt brushing her thighs. I'm so sorry, Mr. Cross," she stammered, fumbling with the buttons. "It was hanging in the laundry. I thought it was—" He raised a hand slightly, stopping her apology midair. "Don't." The word was calm, low, but it carried weight. He took a slow step closer, and for a second she forgot how to breathe. "You wear it better than I ever could," he said quietly, a faint curve at the corner of his lips before he turned away. Mara stood frozen, heat crawling up her neck. When he disappeared down the hall, she finally exhaled, her heart thudding so hard she could hear it echo. She yanked off the shirt, folded it neatly, and pressed it against her chest. "Great," she muttered under her breath. "First week, and I'm already stealing laundry." What she didn't see was Ethan pausing just around the corner, his hand brushing the wall, that same faint cologne still lingering in the air. For the first time in a long while, the meticulous billionaire smiled without meaning to. He told himself it was nothing, just a funny accident, but as he walked back to his study, the image of her in his shirt refused to leave his mind. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds over Manhattan, and in one quiet mansion, a small mistake had just begun to change everything. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the quiet marble floors of Cross Manor. Mara kept her head down as she passed the dining room, hoping not to see Ethan. Her heart still fluttered at the memory of yesterday, the accidental shirt, his calm voice that had somehow felt both kind and dangerous. She had barely slept, replaying that moment in her mind until dawn. In the laundry room, she found a small note sitting on the ironing board. It was written in neat, deliberate handwriting. "For repairs. Do not rush." Next to it lay the same white shirt, perfectly folded, with a missing button and a tiny tear near the cuff. She froze. He had noticed her careful stitching from the night before and left the shirt there on purpose. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. The fabric still carried his scent. She whispered to herself. He remembered. That afternoon she worked in silence, polishing the library shelves where Ethan often spent hours reading. Through the tall glass windows, she saw him outside in the courtyard, on a phone call, posture straight, expression unreadable. He looked powerful, almost untouchable. She wondered how a man like him could even notice someone like her. When he came inside, their eyes met through the reflection in the glass. She quickly turned away, pretending to adjust a vase. "Mara," he said softly from behind her. She turned, startled. "Yes, sir?" "You fixed the shirt perfectly. Most people would have sent it out. You sewed it by hand." She swallowed, unsure what to say. "Old habit," she murmured. "My mom taught me to mend things instead of throwing them away." Ethan nodded slowly. "A skill most people forget once they can afford not to care." His tone carried no arrogance, just quiet observation. For a second, the room felt smaller, warmer. "Thank you, Mr. Cross," she said quickly, retreating toward the door. But he stopped her. "You said your mother taught you. Is she still in New York?" Mara hesitated. "Yes, but she is sick. I am saving up for her treatment." Ethan's gaze softened. "That explains why you work 2 shifts. She blinked in surprise. How did you? He gave a faint smile. You think people who run empires cannot read exhaustion? She blushed, gripping the cleaning cloth tighter. I am fine, sir, really. I am sure you are, he said, his eyes holding hers for one long moment before he turned away. Later that evening, as she finished her chores, she found another small envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was a card with elegant gold letters, Cross Foundation, Annual Art and Design Gala. You are invited. Her name was written underneath, in his handwriting. Her breath caught. She had mentioned once to another maid that she dreamed of studying fashion design. Was this his way of helping, or just a kind gesture from a distant man who pitied her? Either way, she could not imagine showing up among designers and CEOs. Still, her fingers traced the edge of the invitation as if it might disappear if she let go. Upstairs, Ethan stood at his window, watching the lights of the city spread across the horizon. For years he had surrounded himself with silence and order, things that did not surprise or disappoint. But this girl, this quiet maid who patched a shirt instead of replacing it, had cracked something open in him. He exhaled, half amused, half uneasy. He told himself it was nothing more than curiosity. Yet as he glanced at the calendar marked with the upcoming gala, a thought crossed his mind he could not shake. Perhaps it was time someone reminded him what real grace looked like. And he already knew exactly who that someone was. The week passed faster than Mara expected. Each day, she debated whether she should go to the gala or quietly return the invitation and pretend it never happened. She told herself it was a mistake. Maybe he meant to give it to someone else. But every time she saw Ethan walking through the halls in his tailored suits, calm and unreadable, she felt that maybe, just maybe, he wanted her there. On Friday evening, she finally gave in. The city outside was alive with lights when she borrowed a simple black dress from another maid and mended a small tear near the hem. She tied her hair up, put on the only pair of heels she owned, and took the subway to the Cross Foundation's downtown venue. The grand ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and the low hum of polite laughter. Waiters in crisp uniforms moved between tables carrying champagne flutes. Mara hesitated at the entrance, clutching the small invitation like a lifeline. She felt invisible and exposed at the same time. A security guard checked her name on the list, nodded, and let her through. Inside, everything gleamed: marble floors, silk gowns, and the scent of expensive perfume that made her head spin. She stood near the edge of the crowd, pretending to admire the art displayed along the walls. Then she heard a voice behind her. You came. Ethan stood a few feet away, wearing a black tuxedo that made him look effortlessly commanding. She blinked, unsure how to respond. You invited me, she said softly. Did I? He replied, almost teasing. I just left an envelope. You made the choice to show up. His gaze held hers until she looked down, trying to steady her breath. I should probably not be here, she whispered. Everyone here belongs to your world, not mine. Ethan's tone gentled. You belong wherever you choose to stand, Mara. Do not let the chandeliers tell you otherwise. She almost smiled. But before she could answer, a tall woman in a sequined gown approached. Ethan, darling, the board members want you for a photo. The woman's eyes flicked to Mara, full of curiosity and faint disapproval. Ethan gave a polite nod. Of course. Then to Mara, he added quietly, do not leave yet. He walked away, leaving her standing under the soft light of the chandeliers. Mara turned toward one of the paintings, a fashion sketch framed in gold. The strokes were bold, free, beautiful. Something about it made her chest tighten. She whispered, maybe someday. A voice beside her said, do you design? It was a gray-haired man holding a glass of wine, smiling kindly. A little, she admitted. Just sketches. Nothing professional. That is how all professionals start, he said. Show me sometime. She nodded, but her heart was already somewhere else on the balcony, where she spotted Ethan stepping away from the crowd. She hesitated, then followed the pull inside her chest. Outside, the air was cool, the city stretching endlessly below. He heard her footsteps and turned. For a moment they just looked at each other, the sound of the gala muffled behind them. So, he said quietly, do you still think you do not belong here? She gave a small laugh, shaking her head. I think I am still figuring that out. He studied her face, the way the wind lifted a strand of her hair. You fixed a shirt with care, he said. You walk into rooms that try to scare you. That is more strength than most people in that room have. Her chest ached at his words. Why are you telling me this? she asked. His answer was almost a whisper. Because I am starting to wonder if I needed the reminder more than you did. They stood in silence, two people from different worlds, connected by a single quiet mistake that had begun to mean something neither of them could name. From the ballroom, the sound of applause rose like a heartbeat, and the city lights glimmered as if listening to the beginning of something neither of them had planned. The days after the gala felt different, quieter, as if something invisible had shifted between them. Mara tried to return to her usual routine, folding sheets and polishing mirrors, but her mind kept replaying Ethan's words on that balcony, the look in his eyes when he said he needed the reminder more than she did. Every time their paths crossed in the house, there was a pause that lingered longer than it should have. He had stopped being just her employer. He had become a question she could not stop asking. One afternoon, she was dusting the library shelves when Ethan appeared in the doorway holding a small box. "You forgot this," he said. It was the invitation card from the gala, slightly creased. She smiled nervously. "I thought you would want it back." "Keep it," he said simply. "It suits you better than me now." She looked down, unsure how to respond. Then he added, "There is another event next week. Smaller, private. Art showcase for emerging designers. I thought you might want to see it." "You think I belong there?" she asked softly. "I think you already proved that you do," he replied. That night she told her mother over the phone about the invitation. Her mother's voice was weak but filled with warmth. "Sometimes God sends us people not to save us, but to remind us that we are still worth saving," she said. Mara blinked back tears. "I do not know what he sees in me, Mom." "Maybe he sees what you forgot to see in yourself," her mother whispered. The next week came faster than she expected. The art showcase was held in a smaller gallery, full of sketches, fabrics, and designs displayed on mannequins. Mara wandered quietly between the exhibits, her eyes wide with admiration. Then she noticed a section at the back, with a single dress on display, a white dress inspired by a shirt, its silhouette simple yet elegant, embroidered with the faintest gold thread along the cuffs. She leaned closer and gasped. It was her stitching pattern, the same she had sewn on Ethan's shirt weeks ago. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a woman beside her said. "Mr. Cross personally requested that piece. He said it was inspired by someone who reminded him that value lies in what is repaired, not replaced." Mara's heart pounded as she turned around, and there he was, standing a few feet away, watching her reaction. "You did this?" she whispered. Ethan nodded. "I wanted to show what a single act of care can create. People keep telling me value is in perfection, but you showed me it is in patience." She felt her throat tighten. "You did not have to do that." "I know," he said quietly. "That is why it matters." For a moment, the noise of the gallery faded, leaving only the two of them in that small circle of light. "I cannot accept any of this," she said finally, her voice trembling. "You have given too much already." Ethan's eyes softened. "Mara, I am not trying to give you anything. I am trying to understand why the simplest thing anyone has ever done for me feels like the most important." The honesty in his voice stunned her. Before she could reply, cameras flashed from across the room, reporters murmuring his name. Ethan straightened, the public mask returning in an instant. "Mr. Cross, is it true you are mentoring an employee?" someone shouted. Mara stepped back instinctively, panic rising in her chest. He turned to her, his voice low. "Do not run." But she was already moving toward the exit, her heart racing. Outside, the cold air hit her face like a wake-up call. She leaned against the wall, breathing hard, the echo of his words still in her ears. Inside that mansion, she had been invisible. But out here, under the city lights, she realized being seen could be just as terrifying. And yet, part of her knew the story between them was far from over. The days after the showcase felt like a blur. Mara avoided Ethan completely, terrified that her presence had embarrassed him in front of his world. Every time she passed the grand hallway of Cross Manor, she remembered the flashes of cameras, the whispers, the way his voice had reached for her just before she ran. She wanted to believe he had meant every word he said that night, but she also knew the gap between them was too wide to cross. Still, fate had a strange way of refusing to let go. One rainy evening, she was closing up the laundry room when she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned, and there he was, soaked from the storm, the usually composed billionaire now standing like a man who had lost his map. You left your phone at the gallery, he said simply, holding it out. She took it, her fingers brushing his for the briefest second. You could have just sent it with someone else, she murmured. I tried, he admitted. But apparently this conversation needed to happen in person. Mara sighed, trying to steady her voice. You should not be here. The staff will talk. Let them, he said quietly. They already do. She swallowed, her pulse quickening. You do not understand, Ethan. They will think I am after something. Are you? He asked. The question hung between them like static. She looked up, meeting his eyes. No, I just wanted to keep my job and my dignity. He nodded slowly. Then we understand each other, because I am trying to keep mine too. His tone was calm, but his eyes gave him away. There was something raw there, something unguarded. That night at the gala, I panicked, she confessed. I did not want to ruin everything you built. You could not ruin it, he said. You reminded me why I built it in the first place. A silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the windows. Finally he said, Come with me. There is something I want to show you. She hesitated but followed him through the quiet hallways, up to the second floor where a door she had never noticed stood slightly ajar. Inside was a room filled with sketches pinned to boards, fabrics draped across tables, and sewing machines lined neatly in rows. What is this? She whispered. A design studio, he replied. I am starting a foundation for underprivileged artists. You once told me you wanted to design clothes that made people feel seen. I remembered. Mara's breath caught. You did this because of me? Because of what you reminded me of, he said softly. That people are not disposable, Mara. Neither are their dreams. She felt tears sting her eyes as she stepped closer to one of the tables. There, under a spotlight, was a single white shirt, her stitching pattern, perfectly replicated, framed behind glass. This is your signature now, Ethan said. If you want it. She turned to him, overwhelmed. I do not know what to say. Say you will take the job, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Head designer for the foundation. You will have your own team, your own name on the door. I cannot, she breathed. It is too much. It is not enough, he said. Not for what you gave me. She looked down, tears slipping freely now. And what did I give you, Ethan? He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. A reason to feel human again. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then she nodded, wiping her tears, her voice trembling. Okay, she whispered. I will do it. Ethan exhaled, relief flashing in his eyes before he smiled, small, real, unguarded. Outside, the rain finally stopped, and for the first time in months, the air inside Cross Manor felt alive again. Neither of them said another word, but both knew something irreversible had begun. The distance between Billionaire and Maid had started to disappear, thread by thread. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a dream Mara never dared to imagine. The once quiet halls of Cross Manor now buzzed with the sounds of sewing machines, creative chatter, and the hum of possibilities. The new foundation had launched quietly under Ethan's guidance, but it was Mara who brought life into it. She had become the head designer, though she still cleaned her own desk and brewed her own coffee, habits that grounded her when everything else felt unreal. Every morning, Ethan would stop by the studio, coffee in hand, to ask how things were going. Sometimes he stayed longer than necessary, offering small suggestions or simply watching her work. He never hovered, but his presence filled the room like gravity, steady, patient, inevitable. One afternoon, she was pinning a fabric sample to a mannequin when he said, "Do you ever stop?" She smiled without looking up. "I could ask you the same thing." "Touché," he replied, a rare warmth in his tone. "I just think even brilliance needs to rest." "I am not brilliant," she said, laughing softly. "I am just lucky you believed in me." He stepped closer, his voice lower now. Luck had nothing to do with it. The air thickened between them, charged with something neither of them dared name. Then the door opened, breaking the spell. His assistant entered, holding a tablet. "Mr. Cross, there is an issue with the board. They are questioning your decision to put a former maid in charge of the Foundation's creative division." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Tell them to question results, not resumes." The assistant hesitated, clearly uneasy. "They say it could affect investor confidence. Then they can invest somewhere else," he said firmly. Mara stood frozen, her stomach twisting. When the assistant left, she spoke softly. You cannot fight the whole world for me. Ethan turned to her. Who said I am fighting for you? I am fighting for what is right. People will not see it that way, she said. They will see a billionaire blinded by pity. His eyes darkened. Is that what you think this is? I do not know what to think, she admitted. All I know is that I do not want to be your charity project. He exhaled sharply, frustration flickering across his face. Mara, I have built empires from nothing, but I have never seen anyone build hope the way you do. Do you really think I would risk everything just to feel generous? She looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. Then why does it feel like I am the one who owes you? The question hung heavy in the air. Ethan took a step closer, but she backed away. I should get back to work, she said quickly, turning toward her table. He hesitated, then nodded. If you truly believe that, then prove them wrong. Show them why I was right to trust you. And he left the room, leaving her staring at the half-finished dress on the mannequin. That night, Mara stayed long after everyone had gone home. The studio lights cast soft shadows over the sketches pinned to the walls. She traced her fingers along the design she had been working on, a dress inspired by freedom, with golden threads that shimmered faintly under the light. It reminded her of the first time she touched his shirt, the moment everything changed. She whispered to herself, prove them wrong. Her phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. The world will always talk. Let them. Just do what you do best. She smiled faintly, tears stinging her eyes. In that moment, she realized something had shifted again. It was no longer about class, status, or fear. It was about respect, trust, and something deeper growing quietly between them, something neither of them was ready to name, but both could feel as clearly as the heartbeat of the city outside. 2 months later, the foundation was thriving. Orders were coming in from across the country, and journalists praised the project for blending creativity with compassion. Yet success brought a different kind of pressure. Mara barely slept, working late to meet deadlines, sketching new designs until her hands ached. Ethan noticed the exhaustion in her eyes every time he stopped by, but she always smiled and said she was fine. One evening, after the team had gone home, Ethan found her asleep at her desk, a spool of gold thread still clutched in her hand. He gently set down a cup of coffee beside her and whispered, "You are going to burn yourself out." She stirred awake, blinking at him. "You should not sneak up on people like that," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "It is my company. Technically, I cannot sneak." She rubbed her eyes, embarrassed. "I was just finishing the last pattern." "At this hour?" he said softly. "Mara, the point was to give you a future, not to watch you destroy yourself." "I am not destroying anything," she said, standing. "I am proving something." He frowned. "To who? To them? To me?" "To myself," she replied quietly. "I need to know I earned this, not that it was given to me." Ethan studied her, seeing the same fire that had drawn him to her from the start. "You do not have to keep fighting ghosts," he said. "You have already proven yourself." "Then why does it not feel that way?" she whispered. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Ethan said, "Come with me." She hesitated, but his tone left no room for argument. They drove through the city in silence, until they reached a small brick building tucked behind a row of shops. When he unlocked the door, she froze. Inside were sewing machines, fabric rolls, and sketches from young students pinned to the walls. "What is this?" she asked. "The community center we funded," Ethan said. "You inspired it. Every student here will have access to materials, mentors, and scholarships. They call it the Mara Initiative." Her mouth fell open. "You named it after me?" "After what you represent," he corrected. "Grace, resilience, the belief that talent is not defined by birth." Tears welled in her eyes. "Ethan, I do not deserve this." "You do," he said firmly. "And if you cannot see it yet, I will keep showing you until you do." For the first time, she could not find words. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You changed this place. You changed me." She looked up, her heart pounding. "Do not say things you will regret." "I am not a man who speaks without meaning," he said. "You know that." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed sharply, breaking the moment. He answered it, his expression darkening. "The board leaked documents to the press," he said grimly. "They are accusing me of misconduct, claiming favoritism toward you." Mara's face went pale. "What?" "They are trying to force me out," he said. "They think this foundation is a distraction." "Because of me," she whispered. "No, Ethan said. Because they cannot stand what they do not understand. You need to let me go, she said, her voice trembling. If you fight for me again, you will lose everything. Mara, please, she said, tears brimming. Do not throw away your empire for someone like me. He looked at her for a long moment, his jaw tight, then nodded slowly. If this is what you want, I will respect it. It is what is right, she said, turning away before he could see her cry. That night, Mara packed her things and left Cross Manor without saying goodbye. The city lights blurred through her tears as the cab pulled away. Behind her, Ethan stood at his office window, watching the rain streak down the glass, knowing he had just let go of the only thing that had ever felt real. 3 months passed. The news cycle had moved on. The rumors had faded, and the world went back to forgetting what it never really understood. The Cross Foundation survived, though Ethan stepped back from the public eye. The board kept him on as a silent partner, and he accepted it without protest. For the first time in years, he worked from his penthouse instead of his office, the rooms echoing with a kind of quiet that used to comfort him, but now only reminded him of what was missing. Across the city, in a modest apartment above a tailor shop, Mara started again. She found work helping a small boutique with design samples, earning just enough to pay rent and her mother's medication. Her days were long, her nights longer, but she found peace in the rhythm of creation. One evening, she walked past a store window displaying the foundation's new campaign poster. Her breath caught. The slogan read, "Repaired, not replaced," written over a photo of a stitched shirt, the same pattern she had once sewn by hand. She stood there for a long time, the city lights reflected in the glass. Then she smiled, a small, sad smile. She whispered, "You kept your promise, Ethan." At that same moment, across the city, Ethan sat alone in his study, staring at the framed invitation from the first gala. On the desk beside it was a sketch she had once left behind, creased, imperfect, beautiful. He had looked for her quietly, through mutual contacts, but she had disappeared into the noise of the city. One afternoon, while reviewing submissions for the next art showcase, a familiar signature caught his eye. Mara Jenkins, independent designer. His heartbeat quickened. The file contained photos of new designs, raw but radiant, carrying the same spirit that had once transformed his foundation. Without hesitation, he wrote one line to his event coordinator. "Approve her immediately. No questions." A week later, the showcase opened at a public gallery, smaller than the grand events of the past but filled with energy. Mara had been invited to present her collection under her own name. When she arrived, she almost turned back at the door, overwhelmed by the crowd. But something inside her whispered, "You belong here." She took a deep breath and walked in. As the night unfolded, her designs drew attention for their sincerity, every piece inspired by imperfection and resilience. Toward the end of the evening, she stood alone near a display when a voice behind her said, "You kept your promise too." She froze. Slowly, she turned, and there he was. Ethan stood in the doorway, dressed simply, no entourage, no flash. His presence felt different, less like a billionaire, more like a man who had learned to be still. "You should not be here," she said, her voice unsteady. The press can write what they want," he interrupted gently. "They always do." "Why now?" she asked. "Because I needed to see what you built," he said. "You did this without me, and it is extraordinary." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You are the one who gave me the chance." "No," he said, taking a slow step closer. "You gave me a reason." For a moment, time seemed to fold. The noise of the gallery faded until there was only them. "You once told me not to throw away my empire for someone like you," he said quietly. "So I did not. I built something better instead." "What did you build?" she whispered. "A life that means something," he said. "And maybe if you let me, I would like to build the rest of it with you." Her eyes filled with tears. The distance that had once felt impossible now seemed like nothing at all. She reached out, her hand trembling, and he took it without hesitation. The cameras flashed again somewhere in the background, but neither of them noticed. For the first time, being seen did not feel terrifying. It felt like freedom. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall gallery windows, washing the city in soft gold. The showcase had ended hours ago, but Mara and Ethan were still there, sitting on the steps near the stage, surrounded by silence and scattered programs. For a long while, neither spoke. She kept turning the invitation card over in her hands, the same gesture she had done months ago when everything had first begun. "I never thought we would end up here," she said finally, her voice quiet. Ethan smiled faintly. Neither did I. But maybe that is the beauty of mistakes. They lead us exactly where we are meant to be. She looked up at him, the corners of her mouth lifting. Do you really think what we did was fate? No, he said softly. I think it was choice. You chose to be brave. I chose to believe again. The gallery lights dimmed as the staff began to close up, and they walked outside into the morning air. The city smelled like rain and coffee and new beginnings. Cameras had caught glimpses of them the night before, but neither cared anymore. For the first time, there was nothing to hide. Weeks later, the Cross Foundation announced a new collection designed under a collaboration between Ethan Cross and Mara Jenkins. The campaign was simple: threads of grace, inspired by repair, crafted by hope. The line sold out in days, but the success was not what mattered. What mattered was the way the world saw them: partners, equals, two people who had built something not out of power or pity, but trust. On the night of the official launch, the venue glowed under soft lights. Guests mingled, journalists whispered, and at the center of the room stood a glass display containing the very first shirt, the one that had started it all. A note beside it read, "The best mistakes are the ones that teach us how to love." Mara stood beside it, her fingers brushing the glass. She turned when she felt Ethan's presence next to her. "You kept it?" she said. "Of course," he replied. "It reminds me to stay human." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a ring, simple and elegant, engraved with a gold thread pattern along the edge. "Do you remember what you told me that first day?" he asked. "That you were just trying to keep your job and your dignity." She nodded, smiling softly. "And look at you now," he said. "You built both, and somehow you built me along the way." Her eyes glistened as he took her hand. "Mara Jenkins," he said quietly, "the woman who taught me that value is in what we mend, not what we replace. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she laughed through them. "You really had to make it poetic, did you not?" "It is the only way I know how," he said. She nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes, Ethan. 1,000 times yes." The room erupted in applause from the guests who had gathered near, but for Mara and Ethan, the world seemed to narrow to a single heartbeat. Later, under the city lights, they stood on the balcony of the Foundation's headquarters, looking down at the glowing skyline of Manhattan. "You know," she said, leaning against him, "if I had not worn that shirt—" He finished her sentence softly. "I might never have seen you." She smiled. "The best mistake we ever made." He kissed her forehead, his voice barely a whisper. "Here is to every wrong turn that led me to you." The camera of the night faded out on their silhouettes, no longer Billionaire and Maid, but two souls stitched together by something stronger than status. And as the city pulsed beneath them, their story closed not with an ending, but with a promise that sometimes even the smallest mistake can change everything forever.